Davante Adams, Amari Cooper, and DeAndre Hopkins could all be traded before the deadline. How do you handle that in your dynasty leagues? We'll discuss that and more on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Kate Madjuk is out today. She will be back for tomorrow's show, but it's a Wednesday show. So of course that means that Matt Williamson is here. Follow him on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. We've got some really good mailbag questions for you guys today, but our first one is regarding trade rumors, Matt, which your Steelers happen to be a part of, it seems like every single day. But I wanted just a general discussion here. So like Davante Adams, Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins, you guys know all the names by now. How do you handle trade rumors when it comes to your dynasty teams? Because I have Davante Adams in a short bench dynasty league. I would love to move him, but I don't know. I don't even know how to value him at this point. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, Adams, I absolutely think is going to get moved. It's a matter of when and where and all those things, of course. Like my 18-year-old son drafted Adams in his redraft league, and every day he asked me, Dad, is he getting moved? I can't start him. He's getting moved. I got Rashee Rice too, and I got nobody to start. Should I pick somebody off the bench? Should I dump him for anything? It's time to move on. And it can be stressful. Like, that it's coming. I mean, the Ayuk stuff was crazy, but at least it wasn't in season week to week where you have to field a starting lineup. I will say, generally speaking, I think us, the general public, the average fantasy player, gets too excited about it. Like, all of a sudden you think they're going to go to the 83 Chargers and, light the world on fire, or Moss is going to the Patriots. And, more often than not, it's not an immediate fix. I mean, a mid-season or an off-season trade is better. A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, they get a lot of time. Yeah, great call. Those ones, they're not getting on a moving train. They can get acclimated with their team, and people don't think that's real, but it really is real. I mean, this time of year, NFL teams get about 6 hours a week of being on the field to prepare for the next opponent. And yeah, Davante Adams can get open, and Josh Allen or Aaron Rodgers will hit him on an out route. But the back shoulder stuff and, option routes and things like that take time. And you probably aren't going to be super thrilled when he gets traded the next week or two at least. And hopefully it, jives at any point.
I can only think of one big name receiver over the last 8 or so years that got traded and actually performed better once he got traded. And that was Amari Cooper, who you mentioned, who got traded from the Raiders to the Cowboys, took off in that second half of the year with Dallas and Dak Prescott. But you look at most of these receivers, you're right. Like, they see a significant drop in production because they're still trying to figure out their way into this offense, right? They're still trying to find what their role is going to be. So I've got to assume Hopkins, Adams, Cooper, all these guys, they're just going to be 85% of what we expect them to be on their current teams. So you kind of have to factor that in when you're considering buying or selling them.
That being said, I mean, in addition to, getting on page with the playbook and their quarterback, people don't think about this, but they got to buy a house or rent something and move their clothes and maybe leave
family.
I say maybe not move their family. Their kids might just stay in school and like, all right, maybe I'll see you next month. Like, I got to go. Like, that kind of stuff happens. I mean, small story, like when we got hired at Akron, we hired UTEP's offensive line coach, and nobody was making any money back then. He got in a car from UTEP, drove to Akron, his wife with 4 young kids rented a U-Haul and packed up the whole house herself and came to Akron. Like, of course it's easier if you're Davante Adams and you're not making 40 grand a year or whatever, but the real world does exist.
Yeah, it's tough. I do want to ask you about Adams specifically, because I do think, and you mentioned it, he's the most likely to get traded.
Mm-hmm.
Now that the Saints have Derek Carr likely going to miss a couple games, the Jets are a disaster in several different ways. Is there anywhere where you could see him landing where his fantasy and dynasty value would go up?
That's a tough one. Well, there's nowhere to go but up when you're not on the field. Whether he's hurt or not. I predicted on Peacock and Williamson yesterday that he was going to play in the Monday night game, which is Jets versus Buffalo. And that was right on the heels of Robert Saleh's firing, thinking now Aaron Rodgers, if he didn't already, has all the power in the world. They're pushing their chips in. But Buffalo's the landing spot. Like Buffalo would be great. That's what we want. I'm not sure Pittsburgh would be great. I'm not sure Baltimore would be great. New Orleans, as you mentioned now, I think would be short-term terrible. And the Jets are okay, but I don't want to compete with Garrett Wilson either,
Well, that's where I wonder, like, if the best landing spot is just with the Raiders, right? And I know that's probably pretty unlikely because of all that's going down, but at least that's an offense that he knows and that they can build, give him a bunch of targets. But I don't see that working out, Matt. It seems like he wants to be gone regardless of how they're doing, right? It just seems like he's just kind of sick of the Raiders organization and franchise, and he wants to change the scenery. But I'm just struggling to find a spot where it's like, okay, here, Davante, you're getting a locked 11 targets every single week in this offense from a good quarterback. I don't see that out there right now for him.
I only see Buffalo.
That's the only one. I think that's the only one.
Yeah.
Any other receivers you want to mention that you think could potentially be traded? I know we mentioned Hopkins, Cooper. Do you think Cooper gets moved?
I think they're the worst offense in the league. And I just don't know that they realize it yet, and so maybe it's more of a deadline type of thing. They have a lot of cap issues going forward. It would be the smart move to me. I think they have no chance at the postseason the way that they're going. So I'm going to say yes. What about Kirk or DeAndre Hopkins?
See, Christian Kirk, if I was trying to make a move at receiver, that's the one I would want because he's the youngest of the group. He's actually pretty cheap. He signed that big deal a couple of years ago, and then the wide receiver market exploded. Now it looks pretty cheap for like a number 2 receiver. So, yeah, that's the one that I would want because he can play on the outside. He can play in the slot. He can make plays after the catch. I just don't know if Jacksonville is going to want to move on because I was talking with Tony Wiggins yesterday. They beat the Bears, and they get to 2-4. Mm-hmm. You look at that back end of the schedule, and it is – I mean, they could easily, Matt, even Jacksonville, who I don't think is a good team, could win 5 games at the end of the season straight, right in a row. I just don't think the Jags are going to want to give up talent around Trevor Lawrence as they're trying to figure out what they have at quarterback.
Maybe if they would have lost last week, it'd have been a totally different story.
I think that's the deal. If they're 0-4, or even if they lose this week against the Bears and they're 1-5 or whatever, maybe that's when you start to hear the rumblings. But I got to believe that Jacksonville is going to want to hold on there.
So how about this segue? I mean, this is what dynasty owners are dealing with their teams. Should I buy or should I sell? That's going to be segment 3, folks. That's our. How about that Williamson segue? Professional move.
There you go. Professional podcast right there. Let's talk about some 1-year rentals and what's the most that you would give up for a player for the next 12 games. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. I absolutely love it because you can get action in most states, including California, Florida, and Georgia, and Texas as well, for all of my Cowboy fans out there. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup alive. Go to prizepicks.com or download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Just download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day, one in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. They do a fantastic job over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcast in on YouTube. All right, Matt, let's talk about one-year rentals. So on yesterday's show, Kate and I ran through a bunch of players that we consider one-year rentals, whether it's Juju Smith-Schuster, Kareem Hunt, Alan Lazard. What is your general thought when it comes to one-year rentals, and what's the most that you would be willing to give up in a trade?
Start with probably the obvious. Sending next year's first is almost always off the table.
It's out of
I mean,
question.
yeah. I mean, and I guess I'd have to define one-year rentals. I mean, like, if that meant, I don't have a great example, but
let's use Kareem Hunt because I think Kareem Hunt is going to be for as long as he stays healthy, the lead back in Kansas City. He got 27 touches on Monday night. So for the example of Kareem Hunt, who you know is likely going to be the starter throughout the rest of the fantasy season, what would you give up for him?
Okay. That's much different than a wide receiver one or, something big that, somebody that we're talking about guys you're not happy to have on your roster when the season ends.
Well, I mean, in a lot of these cases, like, I don't know if Kareem Hunt will be on a roster.
He might not play football, right?
But it doesn't mean he's not valuable right now.
Agreed. Okay. So, I mean, that's better than I'm giving up more than for Jordan Mason than I am Kareem Hunt, of course. We've talked about him in the past. I think you have to realize, assuming Kareem Hunt is on a bad dynasty team right now, I mean, if it's on another contender, I don't think you're going to get him off them. Probably not, because you're not going to give enough to pry them away. Now, I often look at it when I'm the guy that has Kareem Hunt of I put in some fab money. I got this guy. And if I can flip that for a third, if I can turn fab money into a third, I think I made a profit. You know what I mean? Yeah. If I'm not competing, I'm shoving him in my starting lineup now, but that might have me win a game or two that I really don't want to deep down, So I think that you have to realize that the seller is ambitious, probably, this is a quick flip. If I can turn this into a future pick or a young receiver or something along those lines, I'm listening. I'm sure as the owner of Hunt, I would come back at you like, well, how about I give you a Hunt and a third for McConkey, and I'm not in that market. I would have to be really desperate at running back and think I can win the whole thing to give up Leggett or McConkey or A.D. Mitchell or, you know what I mean? Like somebody.
I don't think I would give up a player. I think it would be a pick for me. And that's
I would try to pry a player out of you as opposed to a random third-round pick that might be the 36th pick overall. If I can get somebody young and I'll sweeten it up, but I don't want to go down that road as the buyer.
Yeah. Generally, I don't like to go buy these players because there's just a number of risk factors. Like in the case of Kareem Hunt, I mean, he's pretty old, Matt, and he's got a lot of wear and tear on his body. So yes, he
doesn't even look good.
I thought he looked okay. I
just think he's slow to begin with.
He is slow to begin with. Right.
Yeah.
But I think
he's only going to get worse. But
I think, and that's the point. Like, I think he looks good right now. One of the things I always worry about with these running backs, and even somebody like Saquon Barkley, who had a fantastic September, is yes, you look good early in the season when your body is fresh. But when we get to the dog days of the season and it's 3 games in 12 days, which a lot of these teams are going to end up playing, what do you look like then? I would be almost
the Chiefs offense overall. I mean, it looks like the 2020 guys out there with Juju and Kelsey. What are they going to look like late in the year?
Exactly. I would be very hesitant to give up anything more than a 3rd round pick. I think a 1st and 2nd round pick for any one-year rental, Matt, I would just be out on. But I think I'm with you. Like if I had Kareem Hunt, and let's say even if I am a contender and I picked him up for 30% of my fab budget, I would have no problem flipping him in a 3rd for a 2nd round pick because I just don't trust these guys to stay healthy by the time we get to the fantasy playoffs.
I'm big in, I mean, this is a little bit of a side note, but I'm big in the dynasty world of the quick flip. Like if I can turn fab money into a draft pick of any kind, I'm usually in. Rarely am I like, chances this might end up being Priest Holmes, in a 10-year starter that was undrafted. Like I'm usually, if I can turn 90 cents into $1 in a week or two, I almost always do it. Here's a weird one, though. I know you don't want to move players, but what if like someone said, give me Tyrone Tracy or
what's his face?
Yeah, or the Miami rookie running back.
Jalen Wright. I just wouldn't trade anybody that I drafted in the first 2 rounds after 5 weeks for a Kareem Hunt. Like
Blake
Tracy, yeah, exactly. You're talking about somebody who went in the 5th round who's already 25 years old. Like I can do that. I wanted to ask you about a couple other 1-year rentals. Just quick thoughts. You mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster had a huge game against the Saints. Any interest at all there?
Yes.
Yes.
Not because he's good, because they scheme up those type of players really, really well. Okay. And he's not terrible. I mean, I picked him up in my redraft league. And I'm not going to start him right away, but I think he's a great sell high, though. I mean, if you own him in Dynasty, I'm flipping him in a heartbeat. But in redraft, I put in a claim for him, and I was happy to get him.
All right. What about Allen Lazard?
No,
he's a top 20 receiver through 5 weeks. So just no interest there.
I don't see a ceiling. Okay. I don't know. I think there's a chance Adams there. Yeah, he's never been for me.
It seems like he's very touchdown dependent, and we know touchdowns are very fluky. So, and there's always the possibility, as you mentioned, that Davante Adams shows up on this team by Monday night. One more I want to ask you.
And the wheels could totally fall off in New York too.
Yes, I think every week that goes by, we're getting closer and closer to that doomsday scenario.
Yeah.
Listen, I didn't want to bring up Cowboys Steelers too much. So I'm just going to mention one player here, Matt. Rico Dowdle. He's a 26-year-old running back on a 1-year deal with Dallas. I've got to assume the Cowboys are going to draft somebody next year. It's a great running back class looking ahead.
Yeah.
Is Rico somebody that you would send a draft pick away for if you needed one?
Yes, because I think he's talented. I think Zeke and Cook have no value in the NFL anymore. I mean, they are shot as could be, so there's really no competition there whatsoever. Do you think there's any chance the Cowboys trade for Travis Etienne or do anything like that? Probably you think that backfield is as is for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can see them is picking up more like street free agents, but
the
names that are out there right now. The Cowboys have really invested in their analytics department over the last 2 years. Like they've spent millions in dollars in people that are helping develop a strategy. They just have talked to Jerry Jones and convinced Jerry Jones not to spend money or high picks on the running back. So I think this is what you're going to get, at least for this year, is Rico Dowdle getting the lion's share of the work, Zeke coming in for ceremonial purposes, and then some Hunter Lipke every once in a while.
So that makes me think about next year. It's probably Dowdle and a 4th-round pick.
Probably.
I mean, they're not using a 1st-rounder on him, apparently.
And that's the thing with Dowdle. He's a free agent. I could also see Dowdle having a nice year, getting a nice payday, and Dallas just saying, okay, thanks. We'll see you later.
Yeah, and then you maybe flip him as a Dowdle owner in the offseason.
Yep.
Someone's excited about him because someone gave him $5 million a year or whatever.
Yep. All right, Matt, let's talk about one of the hardest things in dynasty leagues is when to know when to pull the plug on your team. We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So go bet on the Thursday night football game. We've got a really good one. 49ers and Seahawks, both teams absolutely need a win. Go bet $5. You'll get $200 in bonus bets that you can use for every game in week 6, or go check out the futures markets, which I love. Like you can go bet on who you think is going to win the NFL MVP, your division winners, who's going to make the playoffs, and so much more over on FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is the most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to the Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, and the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. There are so many awesome courses that you can take. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in whenever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That is hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Every day on tomorrow's show, Kate will be back. We'll take a look at the latest batch of ADP over on Dynasty League Football. So make sure you check that out. But Matt, let's talk about when to pull the plug on your Dynasty team. We're through 5 weeks. You probably have a pretty good sense whether your team has it or doesn't have it. But how do you know for sure when to start tearing down your team?
This is difficult. Self-scouting is very difficult because you definitely enter it with biases. You know, you pick these guys because you like them. So you're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. It's a heck of a lot different if you inherited an orphan team and man, I don't like any of you guys. You know, it's kind of like a new coaching staff in the NFL. Like, I'll bring in my dudes. Now, I say this off the bat. I fear as a dynasty owner, if I lean one way or another, I might be too quick to blow it up. You know, I'm not really a contender. You know, give me draft picks. And part of it's because that makes it really fun to me. Like, yeah, I love winning money. Don't get me wrong, but I love having 3 future firsts and a bunch of seconds. And to me, that's just like $100 bills in your pocket that you can turn into whatever you want. And you know, like I'm in 7 dynasty leagues, and the one that I looked at as the weakest one entering the season, I'm 4-1.
Yes.
And it's only because my defensive coordinator's doing a Flores-like job.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's not that my team is particularly good. Yeah, I have Malik Neighbors and some pieces, but really I've just played bad teams. You know what I mean? And if anybody wants a veteran off that team from me, you could have them. You know, I am not having any delusions of grandeur that, I'm going to put it all together and make this huge run. You know, like, I think that's important.
So I'm with you. I have a team that is 5-0, and before the season or within the first 2 weeks of the season, I have now traded Trey McBride, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Justin Fields.
You sent them all packing.
I sent them all packing, right?
Wow.
So it's this hodgepodge of a team that's not scoring a ton of points, but I think I am like 100 points fewer have been scored against me than any other team in the league, right? So you're in a tough spot because it's like you can't really tank if you're 5-0, Matt. Like, you can't start selling.
You're not gonna get the first pick.
No, right. So it's.
But do you regret it now? Like, those names you mentioned, it sounds like you could have made a run.
I don't, but even with those players, I don't know if I would have been good enough to ultimately win. It just happened to be that like Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt and Jordan Mason are taking me to the.
Okay. I mean, you're living off those dudes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So one of the problems that I have as a dynasty owner is I hate tanking. I don't mind trading away players and getting picks, but I don't like being not competitive in fantasy leagues, right? I always want to have a chance. So I struggle with when to fully tear it down. Is there a sign? I mean, outside of just your record, is there a sign or something to look for when you should know when to tear it down?
I just kind of feel like a parent, you should know. You know, like, here's my other piece of advice. A team, especially new people to Dynasty, this is really important, is a team that you have in redraft with your buddies from college or whatever can win the whole thing a lot easier than that exact same roster in Dynasty, because there's 2 or 3 owners that have been building and have depth and have 6 receivers in the top 25. You know what I mean? Like, in redraft, you could get a bounce, or you could pick up Kareem Hunt and
Or there's going to be guys that you can sign on the waiver wire in week 13 that can help you win a championship. Right?
Yeah.
It just happens every year.
And obviously you don't have that option in redraft to blow it up or not, but don't look at your roster and be like, I got a shot here. You know, I mean, yeah, you might, but you really are a wild card team in a 7 seed. You know what I mean? Like you got to go to KC and win. You got to go to Buffalo and win. You're not really going to win, you know?
Yeah. So
it's a lot harder in Dynasty.
You're saying my roster right now with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback and Tyler Lockett as my number 1 receiver that's 5-0 is probably not going to win?
Probably not. But I am shocked one name you mentioned in JSN. I thought that would be a building block for you. He'd be untouchable.
I got a ridiculous offer. Like as much as I love JSN, getting a potentially top 3 first-round pick in this upcoming class was too good to pass up. Yeah. So it all depends on your league, but I feel like you should know, right? Like if you look at your roster and your just gut tells you to blow it up, it's probably time to blow it up. Like if you have any question, and I remember you saying this before, like if you have any doubt whether you should be blowing up your roster or not, you probably should be rebuilding because if you have a great team, you know that you have a great team.
It's the old like poker saying that if you're looking around the table and you're not sure who the sucker is,
it's probably you.
It's you, dude. Yeah.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank Matt for jumping on the show today. Follow him on Twitter at Williamson NFL. Make sure you go download the Locked On Dynasty Football podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Make sure you follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magic. She'll be back on the show tomorrow. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we'll see you right back here on Thursday.